one of the most telling examples of how religion has been twisted, Christianity has been twisted, is a story I recount in the book about where did the belief in original sin come from? Anybody who has ever spent 5 seconds looking in a baby's eyes, just that clear love source shining through, is just like, oh my God. Anybody who's spent 5 seconds looking in a baby's eyes knows that original sin is bullshit.
Cate Montana, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Boo Boo. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
I am too. You're a professional journalist?
Yeah,
author?
Yeah, 35 years, 37 years. Started off in television many moons ago in network television sports production, doing football and basketball and stuff like that, doing slow motion replays. Loved the sports, but I always wanted to be a writer, so I left television and then took a job at a Atlanta newspaper as a reporter, and that was that. I've been writing ever since, getting into trouble.
You got an MA in psychology?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to, when I was in college, I majored in English because I wanted to write. But, when I got into spirituality in my 30s, I wanted to understand what humanity understood about the mind and about consciousness. And it turned out to be kind of limited, but I really kind of wanted that professional. I just wanted some answers from a credible, what I thought originally was a credible source. And obviously I kind of kept running into big brick walls because so many of my spiritual experiences, out of body experiences, Kundalini experiences, visions, that sort of thing flew in the face of everything that I was learning at school, and pretty much just put me in the loony bin, schizophrenic. And I was like, well, okay, that's one way of looking at things. Not that there's not people who have hallucinations and schizophrenia. I'm not saying that, but unfortunately, psychology only goes so far down the road of explaining things. It's very reductionist, like most of our society and all of our scientific endeavors. It's like trying to cram it into the body box and the brain box and try to make everything fit in that.
I had Dr. Anoop on, and he always says, what if mental illness is enlightenment?
Yeah, it's a fine line between mental illness and breakdown and breakthrough. It's a very fine line, and it's not a hard line in the sand either. You can cross over many times, and I think a lot of the problem, so much of the problems that people who do see things that most people don't see or hear things most people don't hear is that there's very little credible room for them to navigate and show up as sane in most people's eyes. And so that's just got to make things really, really tough for people. So I'm sure you're familiar with so many people they just close down, keep their mouth shut, and just like keep their head down and don't make waves. I think that's a really unfortunate way that so many of us in society are programmed. Stick with the program, sit down, shut up, don't make waves, raise your hand, make sure you've got the right answer. And so anything outside of the normal box is like my latest book is called Cracking the Matrix, as you well know. And I never really, until COVID hit, and I really started taking a long, hard look at other forces and other agendas going on this planet. COVID just like threw the door open and just said, look at what's going on and get real, Cate. There's something else going on than your 40 years of meditation and spiritual focus on enlightenment and religion and your society has told you is going on. And how shocking to find that your whole reality has been a construct. Literally. And so bless the people who break out of that construct and stand up. People like David Icke, people like yourself, who are saying, no, there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, and let's get it out on the table and talk about it so that we can free ourselves up.
Yeah, when I started reading Cracking the Matrix, I was like, wow, she's like a female version of David Icke, and David Icke's one of my heroes. So I appreciate your book. And before we get into that, you live in Maui, right?
Yeah, I moved to Maui 5 years ago. I'd been in the Pacific Northwest for like 20 odd years, 25 years. And I just totally got the call to move here. I'd never even been interested in visiting Hawaii. But I ended up visiting a friend, and I literally got called by the spirit of the island of Maui to come home. So I did.
I have to ask you a question. I know something traumatic and horrific just happened, that disaster.
Yeah.
How accurate was mainstream media with what really went on?
Mainstream media was superficial bullshit. Yeah, well, okay. Well, let's just start with death figures, death toll. I don't know what the final official media figure is. It's something like 112 people, something like that. There are hundreds still missing, hundreds of children still missing. And it's not been reported. There were so many oddities. I don't know how familiar you are with the whole subject of laser weapons, but so many of the different laser weapons, they do not destroy blue things like blue trash cans and blue flags and blue porch furniture and blue houses. So there was a lot of that, a lot of blue intact things next to burned out cars, rivers of molten metal, which would require upwards of close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which most forest fires or wildfires don't trigger. I know, you have the houses and the propane tanks and gasoline tanks fueling that. But there were just so many oddities, trees left standing and still alive next to burned out houses and cars that had been gutted and melted down. So that I've talked to a lot of people who saw the police blockading people into downtown Lahaina. Just the constant discrepancies between, everybody says, well, the electric wires were still alive. The wires had been shut off hours and hours beforehand. The shutting off of the water so nobody could fight the fire. It just, the coincidences added up to an unbelievable scenario. And just one more horrible disaster like the Paradise Fire in California, in Northern California in 2018. So there's just a lot of question marks. I'm not saying definitively this was what it was, but it sure looks incredibly suspicious, and it's very convenient for the powers that be to wipe out the landed indigenous people who had had homes in Lahaina for generations. They didn't even have deeds. They went back. I mean, they owned the land before the white people came in. And so, and they're the ones that are hurting the most, that have been completely displaced. And it's very convenient because that Lahaina property, downtown, harbor property, is prime development territory.
Yeah, I've been to Maui, and I've been to the Hawaii a number of times, and it's sad to see the amount of homeless people from the locals. The local people are homeless. Well, guys are golfing, having a cup of tea, laughing. It's just sad to see that.
It's hard, and the organization on the island is very bifurcated. It's very, we're going along with the FEMA and the government routine and the insurance routine and the paperwork routine, and it was a terrible wildfire accident. And then there's, but as you say, the homeless and the displaced is mostly in the native population. So, and we had a horrible homeless situation on the island even before this happened. And the thing of it is, with an island, is you haven't got any next town to go to, When it burns behind you, that's it. There's no place else to go. So there's, and then of course there's all the rumors about smart islands and smart cities and a 15-minute making it a smart island. I haven't run across in my research, I haven't run across anything specific mentioning Maui per se in that, but knowing it's such a magnet for magnets, it's such a magnet for the wealthy elite. There's so many, Oprah, Larry Ellison. I mean, there's everybody who has billions of dollars seems to own part of Maui. And so that's also kind of eyebrow raising, going,
Your book, Cracking the Matrix, before we get into that,
yeah.
Who was Kate Montana before COVID? And as COVID happened, how did you go down to the rabbit hole?
How did I fall down the rabbit hole? Yeah, I thought I had my stuff together, Boo Boo. I was pretty sure I knew what was what. I was not a stranger to conspiracies. I had been awakened to globalist agendas as far back as the 1980s, when I really started diving down the rabbit hole of the U.S. economic system, the betrayal of the United States population, bringing in the fiat currency, the IRS, and the Federal Reserve System, which is not federal; it's a private corporation. And so that was like, oh wow! So I have been aware of globalist agendas for a very, very long time. What I really was not conscious of was an interdimensional, non-physical presence, intelligence, interference driving the global elite agenda. And I had heard about it. I had read about it. I love what you say about David Icke. I had not, I read some of his books and listened to him like 25, 30 years ago. And I was like, wow, that dude's far out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then I forgot about him for 25 years up until COVID. And then I wrote Cracking the Matrix. And then I got reintroduced to David's work. And I was like, oh my God, we're saying the same thing. It was such a validation. It was such a validation for me because, as I say, I hadn't read or anything about or seen anything, him saying anything for like 25 years. So anyway, I was kind of in a spirituality bubble, writing books about consciousness and enlightenment and meditation, explanations of the ego and how to get beyond the ego. I was kind of your typical, no, maybe not typical, New Age spirituality person. And so much of what I have found New Age spirituality to be about is about getting out of your body and getting out there somewhere to a higher, better place, to your higher self, your greater self, your Christ self, your source connection, your whatever, but it's about getting out of here. And I was very much kind of focused on the relief that getting out of here might possibly give me. So when COVID hit, so that was kind of my genre. I wrote a lot of positive stuff, Boo Boo. I was not about to, write about evil and interdimensional influences and demons and possession and overt, interdimensional agendas dragging humanity down into a pit. That was about the farthest thing from my mind. But when COVID happened, I had to come out of my spirituality bubble. I did. I just turned around and I looked at the world and I went, what the is going on? What's really going on? And at that point, I'd examined and experienced and played in the light forever. And so I was like, there's darkness here. There's evil here. So that's when I turned around and I started researching the nature and presence of what we call evil on this planet. And to say that what I discovered shocked me to my core and has absolutely turned my life upside down, inside out, in every which way, and changed my life is a huge understatement.
And you break down the different names for this evil force around the world, different cultures and religions.
Yeah.
Can you name some of them if you don't mind?
Sure. one of the first things I did researching evil was, we're all familiar with Satan, the devil, Beelzebub, that sort of thing. But even the most superficial research showed that every culture of every civilization on every continent in the world has a name and an understanding of this nasty anti-life intelligence. For the Hawaiians, for example, they call it the Eepa. The Native American, I think it's the Iroquois Nation, call it Wetiko. Other Native American tribes call it Wendigo. Of course, Judaism refers to it as, oh, great. Well, let's move on to Islam. Aishatan. Carl Jung, the Austrian psychiatrist, he referred to it as the antimimos, the Antichrist, the destructive force inimical to the well-being of mankind. Of course, the ancient Greeks referred to these entities as the archons. Distinct, malevolent intelligences that could penetrate the mind, body, spirit, emotions of a human being and twist them until they did their bidding and will. And so it was reassuring, to say the least, and really shocking to realize that this is nothing new. People that we have known about, all civilizations on the earth have known about this. And so that led me to the next question of, writing this book was very much like following a line of breadcrumbs. So when I saw the history and the presence of evil on this planet, the archons, I refer to them as through many different names in my book, Cracking the Matrix, because one of the defining characteristics of the archons is their chimerical nature. You can't put your finger on it. It's this, but then it's not this. It's that, but then it's not that. They shift and show up in a way that mirrors, I think, our deepest, whatever your deepest fear is, I think. If you're afraid of snakes or if you're afraid of spiders or bears or whatever, I have a feeling that kind of that's what the astral form that they'll take, or the interdimensional form that they'll show up. They morph, and they can penetrate the mental realm wherever we're weakest, wherever we're most vulnerable, perhaps in your mental realm, or you're emotionally vulnerable or physically ill. And that's where these influences, these interdimensional influences, can come in and attack. And so my second question, after I discovered the ubiquitousness of this intelligence on this planet and how everybody's known about it for thousands of years, and I'm like, well, the next question is, well, if everybody knows about it and everybody's known about it for thousands of years, why haven't we done something about it? And why is this hidden still? And I think part of the answer is what I just talked about, is that the chimeric nature of these interdimensional non-physical beings is such that, I can't just put my finger on it and go, yeah, it's white and it's narrow and it tapers at the end and it looks like this. Because it looks like a lot of different things to a lot of different people and shows up differently. So I think that's one of the difficulties. The second difficulty is we have been assiduously led over the last 2,000 years, especially since the time of Christ, to become more and more focused on the physical, on the material plane, to move out of that ancient pagan mind, if you will, that danced with the fairies and the elves, that was well acquainted with the multidimensional aspect of our existence, and certainly not locked into this is all I am. So we have been narrowed in our focus down into it's only what I can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. That's the only thing I'm going to believe in. And so that's been I think, a deliberate program. initiated by this intelligence to blind us and to keep us suspicious, skeptical. It's like, I didn't see anything. That's a load of hooey, So there are so many different aspects, Boo Boo, to why we haven't seen it. And I go into it extensively in the book, talking about how different religions, especially Christianity, have been, or at least the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have been deliberately infiltrated and the messages twisted, so that we've got beautiful messages about the divine twisted with an agenda to keep the darkness in the shadows and not make it really real, or to make it so frightening that we don't want to look at it. Yeah. Oh, and I'll just, one last thought. I think the most frightening thing that we've been programmed to believe is that evil is in us. We are bad and wrong and sick and twisted and aggressive, violent, untrustworthy, corrupted beings, sinful creatures that don't even deserve life. That message has been hammered and hammered home in the Abrahamic tradition of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And so when you believe you're a pile of poo, when you believe that you're a corrupt creation, you don't trust yourself. You hate yourself. You're ashamed. And you're weakened by that shame and that sense of smallness and helplessness. And that is the program, my friend, to keep us afraid of ourselves, afraid of the shadows, afraid of ourselves, filled with self-contempt, so that we do self-destructive things and we live in emotional torment, mental torment. And the key to understand about these interdimensional forces, Boo Boo, is that they feed on our emotions. The more powerful the emotion, the more, actually, I think there's a word for it. I think David uses this word, loosh. They feed on our emotions and our energies. And the more conflicted, demented, upset, irrational, sad, desperate, fearful we can be made to be, the bigger the feast.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned during the COVID period. I started to look at things. I think for me, my awakening, I had an awakening in 2009. You had one in 2007. But I started to see things and question things at a more, it's like those boxes. I love in your book, you talk about learning how to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Well, I started to, for me, organically, during my awakening, I started to those boxes were removed. And I started to see things that it seems like once you're outside the box, you're like looking at things at a broader level because you're not trapped in those little boxes.
Yeah.
And I started to question things, when everyone was running around scared, shitless about toilet paper. I'm just like, no, it was like, I'm watching everyone in a nightmare having a bad dream, and it's like, holy shit. And then I started questioning things even more. And it became obvious, like if you look at mainstream media, they never talked about anything positive, how to build our immune system. They only talked about staying 6 feet distance, put a mask on your face. It's all about disconnection with people, and what do we think about 6 feet, distance? I think about the 666 as well. 6 feet under death, right? 6 feet around, six parts around the coffin. And then 6 pallbearers. I'm thinking about death, unconsciously, and I talked to a lot of professionals. They said 6 feet distance ain't going to do anything.
Yeah, no.
I started really questioning stuff, and something definitely wasn't right. And it still ain't, and you started looking at the oligarchies or these rulers. And I wanted to read something from the Gospel of Philip if people think we're crazy. because they talk about the archons as well in the Gnostic texts. And it says the rulers wanted to fool people. And that's another name for the archons, the rulers, right? Since they saw the people have kindship with what is truly good, just like as you explained. They took the names of the good and assigned them to what is not good. To fool people with names and link the names to what is not good. So, as if they are doing people a favor, they take the names from what is not good and transfer them to the good in their own way of thinking, for they wish to take free people and enslave them forever. And what's interesting about the Gnostic texts, they talk a lot about the archons, the watchers, the demiurge, and stuff. But the Gnostic text, Jesus it's a whole different Jesus. Instead of focusing on sin and repentance, original sin, Jesus talked about illusion and enlightenment.
Yeah.
Bringing gnosis to the world, self-knowledge, and it seems like these archons and these evil forces you're talking about that are invisible, as David Icke would say, the invisible government, they want us to be in a lower vibration, so it's easier to get sucked into this ignorance and these evil forces. And all you look at in mainstream media, Hollywood, it's all negative stuff. There's nothing like Kate Montana just opened the door for a 90-year-old lady. They never put anything good, serviceful work, or it's always negative, and it keeps us in a survival mode mentality, fear and separation, us against them mentality. And they use these collective egos to control us, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the most telling examples of how religion has been twisted, Christianity has been twisted, is a story I recount in the book about where did the belief in original sin come from? Anybody who has ever spent 5 seconds looking in a baby's eyes, just that clear love source shining through, is just like, oh my God. Anybody who's spent 5 seconds looking in a baby's eyes knows that original sin is bullshit. But how have we come to believe it, have it be a major cornerstone of the Christian church? Well, if we go back to St. Augustine, who, oh boy, I'm going to get my dates all screwed up here, somewhere around 360 AD, he was brought into the church. He converted. He was originally a bad boy. He was a sex fiend, drunk. His father was pagan. His mother was Christian. His mother just despaired of Augustine ever getting out of the drunk tank. But Augustine apparently ran across the teachings of Manichaeism. Now, Mani, the prophet of Babylon, preceded Augustine by about 100 years. He was in the Middle East around 250 AD. And Mani is the person who set forward the idea that the flesh is corrupt, and anybody born into the flesh is corrupt from the get-go by the very fact that you're wearing a physical body and filled with sin, and that you have to pray to God and be cleansed through the course of whatever the rules are to be cleansed for the rest of your life. So Mani, the prophet of Babylon, is the guy who came up with original sin that Augustine then hooked up into and went, oh, I get it. It's my body that made me a bad boy. It wasn't me. Oh my God, now I have an excuse. Original sin. That's why I was so naughty. Mom is going to be so proud of me. I get it now. I'm going to be good, and I'm going to join the Christian church. And then, of course, St. Augustine became a saint. He was so well known. And he introduced the whole concept of original sin into the Synod of, oh God. Anyway, he introduced it into Christian teachings. So the question is, where did Mani get the idea back in 250 about original sin? Well, it turns out Mani talked to an invisible spirit that whispered in his ear and told him about the corruption of the flesh and the evil of man and the evil of the flesh. So when Augustine came along, Mani actually called it his other self. Augustine came along and went, oh, you were talking to a heavenly angel. Of course, this is the truth. And so now, 1800 years later, we're stuck with 1800 years of epigenetic shame and guilt around sex, about being in bodies, and a complete misunderstanding about what a body is and who we are. We believe that we're evil and corrupt. We are beings of pure love. Always have been, always will be. But teachings like that corrupt our minds, and then we begin to believe that what that force that entered the archons, what the archons are, is an anti-life, anti-love, entropic, downward spiraling force, intelligence that knows not love, that knows not connection, has no idea, doesn't want to know, and isn't redeemable because it comes from a completely different source than we do. So anyway, I just wanted to tell that story about the where the idea of original sin came from. And I don't know, Boo, but I don't know any more sickening, more degrading teaching that has ever been perpetrated on humanity than the idea that the Christian church puts out with original sin and Judaism. We're reaping a horrible, horrible harvest 2,000 years later of shame and guilt and low self-esteem because of that teaching. And that's just, oh, yummy. Give me a straw. Somebody give me a straw.
I've heard you talk about spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
What is spiritual bypass for those who may not know or are aware of the term?
You know, for a long time, because I meditated and because I was focused on positive things, because that's what I was taught to focus on. I mean, there was a book that came out in the, late 80s, early 90s called You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. And I latched onto that teaching big time. So because I was thinking about and talking about and trying to focus and meditate on all good things all the time, I was like Pollyanna. Just like, la, 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 everything is beautiful. And it's, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, life is beautiful. Yes, that's true. There are a lot of positive things. And I'm not saying that having a positive mindset isn't helpful in a lot of ways. But to be completely blind to reality and what's actually going on, and to live in a bubble of self-identity that I identified, I am a spiritual person because I meditate, I think positively, I only say positive thoughts, blah, blah, blah. Therefore I'm spiritual, which makes me special. And I was in this bubble of this self-made reality. Well, we all live in a self-made reality. We all live in multiple matrices of our own making. And so I was bypassing the truth of my own being in this bubble, thinking I had it all, thinking I had it made. For God's sakes, Boo Boo, if you'd asked me as little as 5 years ago about anything, I could have given you the answers about everything because I thought I knew it all. So yeah, I was bypassing enormous amounts of myself and enormous amounts of information because I wasn't open to it, because I thought I had the right answer. Back to our early programming and education, whether it's in religion or whether it's in our school system, you got to have the right answer. And having the right answer makes you feel really good. It's like, all right, I'm safe. I'm gonna make the grade. I'm gonna get out of school. I'm gonna get that degree. I'm gonna get that right job. It's gonna give me the income, and I can feel safe. And that is, boy, God, talk about a prison.
In your own definition, what is the matrix, if you don't mind me asking? And how do we get out of it, or how do we begin to see it? I know I've heard people say that the Matrix, the movie, is not a movie; it's a documentary.
Yeah. I think a lot of people. I think one of the reasons that movie made such a splash in 1999 when it came out was because people resonated to it. They knew they were hearing truth, maybe not seeing the whole truth, or the design of the whole truth. But I think people grokked that, you know, what the movie was saying is that line from Trinity, no, from Morpheus, you know, it's been like the truth has been like a splinter in your mind. You feel that something is grotesquely off about this world, but you don't know what it is, and it's been driving you, and you want to know what the truth is. And so, you know, the Matrix is off base in that we're living, I think, that we're living in a, you know, in a physical world, that the physical world itself is a construct. Yeah, oh God, that's a huge rabbit hole. I mean, there are the schools of thought that, God, what was the name? Parker, what was the name? There was a physicist recently who discovered the binary code and very, very, very highly specific computer code at the equations level of how scientists describe the world and the universe and life itself. And they've discovered computer code at the very basis of that. So the jury's out about that. But, you know, I actually don't want to go there because, well, I guess that brings me right around to when you ask me what is the matrix. There are so many damn matrices, boo-boo. You know, there's the matrix of the society that I'm in, and I'm a white American chick, and if I do this, and if I do that, and if I get a degree, and I get a good husband, and I get a good career, that this is going to happen, you know, the formulas. There's that matrix. There's the religion matrix. You know, there's 30, did you know there's 30,000 different Christian denominations in Christianity alone?
Wow.
30,000 different churches based on different interpretations of Scripture. So, and that's just Christianity. So there's all those matrices that we get locked into. We get locked into the money matrix. We get locked into the health and matrix. We get locked into the thinking I'm just a physical body matrix. So there's all these different levels of matrices that actually intertwine. So it's not a cut and dried, this is it. But I think the biggest matrix, and the one that I wrote about in the book, is the social matrix of finally understanding that the fabric of society that I was raised in, the belief in apple pie and mom, you know, the belief in, you know, that American government is, you know, righteous, holding a torch for goodness and godliness, and that government is here to take care of us, and we can be protected by government. All of the story just went up in smoke. Until I was left with the realization that absolutely fuck all nothing I'd ever been taught was true. Whether it was my religion, whether it was my spirituality, whether it was what I'd been taught about our personal human history, whether it was about economics, politics, all of it was out the door. And to say that I was left like a fish out of water, gasping on the shore, flopping around going, oh God, what? But, you know, the minute it finally fell away, what I was left with, and this is the power place, boo-boo. This is the power of getting out of this matrix of belief that I'm going to be taken care of, this cradle-to-grave security, government, structure, etc. It's very patriarchal. When I looked behind the curtain and saw this evil influence and how it's been perpetrating agendas like COVID on humanity, like wars, like Ukraine, like what's going on with Hamas in Israel and the Gaza Strip, it's all planned. It's all agendized. It's all designed to keep us miserable, in conflict, in despair, in remorse, pain, suffering, so that we can continue to be a food supply and controlled for the good of the small elite, which is driven by the overarching interdimensional agenda that actually wants to be able to embody and have what we have, which is actual physical life. That's what it wants. And the only way that low-level frequency, those interdimensional beings, the archons with Tico, Wendigo, Epa, the Antimimos, whatever you want to call that interdimensional intelligence, it operates at such a low-level vibration. We're beings of pure love. It comes from another source that is anti-life. We're actually like oil and water. But if it can penetrate us and convince us that we're pieces of shit, that we're sinful, we're guilty, we're violent, we're disgusting, bring us down, bring us down, bring us down, bring our vibe down to its level. I actually believe that I'm what this is. I believe that I'm an anti-life, anti-force, sinful creature. We have a match set. Now I can come in and own you physically and have a physical experience through your body. That's possession, pure and simple. And the more two-dimensional binary we become, the more black and white we become, the lower our light becomes. The more bifurcated and extreme and conflict-oriented and devices we can be. That's its energy frequency. So that's the plan, Stan, is to drag us down into that low vibrational level so that it can possess and own and have the physical experience. Now, if you can say there's a funny part to this, is that the only way that this force can have what it wants is by destroying us. And then it won't have anything. Because its nature is anti-life. It's on a self-destruct program. That's its nature. And that's the great hope, is that its nature is destruction. Our nature is life and pure love. Never the twain shall meet. And those who no longer buy into that program that we've been forced into adopting and believing, that's been the greatest power, Boo-Boo, is when I saw how I had been tricked into hating myself and despising my humanity and making myself small. When I saw that that was a program that I bought into, and that I, as a powerful creator of love and light and life, oh my God, we're all these amazing creators. I was creating the program for it. It doesn't have enough power to pick up a piece of paper. It doesn't have the power. These interdimensional beings don't have the power to pick up a freaking piece of paper. They need us to do that. So when I got that and I realized I wasn't that, that's when my spirit stood up inside me and went, I got it. I am not that. I am a being of pure love. I am in this body and I'm here now for a reason, and I'm standing up for who and what I am. And it's just like, whoa. And all the fear of that force, we've had, the entertainment industry, the programming industry is so hell-bent on, shoving the evil alien, the nasty, oh my God, the Exorcist, all of the images, fear, 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 don't go there, don't look, be afraid, don't look, be afraid, don't deal with it. It's just like, oh my God. When I got past that, it's just like, oh my God, it's just like the power and the strength and the beauty that comes in, and it's just like, it's intoxicating.
Yeah, when I started to look at this stuff for myself and see it, I had to be careful because it started to make me sick. Almost wanted to throw up.
How so? Really?
Yeah. I love what you say, because like Marianne Williamson says, love is where we come from. Fear is what we learn here. And in the Gnostic text, it talks about our forgetfulness is what creates ignorance, and ignorance is a mother of evil. So when we forget who we really are and what these evil forces are creating us to do, and along with their experiences, our inability to cope with certain situations, it makes us more prone to tap into that evil force or ignorance. I think that's why it's important to learn how to apply meditation and spirituality, not to spiritual bypass stuff, but to really become solid within ourself, our true self, right? And and to have a shield from this evil influence that's
No, we don't.
unconscious.
We don't need a shield. When we finally get clear on who we really are, Boo Boo, it's just like, oh, it's like I don't need to fight that. I don't need to address. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And it's like, so fighting is, oh man, talk about a matrix, the white hats, black hats, the good guys, the bad guys. Let's fight evil. That is one of the trickiest, most convincing, most enticing, seductive programs to keep us in the fight. And if I fight you, I'm feeding you.
Exactly.
I'm operating at that same low level vibration, and it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, you're right. It's really, when you start to see it, it's really stop playing the game. And when you stop playing the game, it has no power over you.
It's got to, and then and when it has no power and it has no food, it leaves of its own accord. We don't have to do anything except learn who we really are. I know it sounds so easy to say words like that, and then they have to actually go physically do it. It's like, oh my God, 40 years later. But that's why when I wrote Cracking the Matrix, and I laid all this stuff out about interdimensional influences and evil, and I had to include in the book a balancing act so that people just didn't read it and just want to split their wrists, how do we get out of this matrix? And, one of the first things is to simply stop. It's my very first key in the book is, you're listening to the news, or you're in the middle of this and you got all this stuff going on in your life and bills and relationships and whatever's going on. And it's just like, stop. Take a few minutes. Take 60 seconds and recenter. Stop. And when you're faced with a decision, a choice, stop. Take a breath. Remember you're a being of pure love. And ask from that place that an answer be given. Go out in nature as much as possible. Get barefoot. Walk on the ground. Sit under a tree. Turn off your flippin' phone. The electromagnetic frequencies being pulsed through our technology is part of what's keeping us locked in the matrix. So disengage from your technology as much as possible. I mean, I kill the power to my office at night. I've actually bought a Faraday material so that I can wrap my router and stuff and protect myself from those frequencies at night. I'm going to wrap my router and all of that even when I'm sitting here in my office, so I'm not bombarded with those frequencies. I have a hat that I wear that is a Faraday. It blocks all EM frequencies, pulsing signals, and Wi-Fi signals, etc. So that's so important to give yourself that peaceful moment to connect with who you really are, which is the life force itself. So, some really simple things, and to start researching, start listening to podcasts like Boo Boo's podcast, get out of the matrix of thinking that you know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I've never known less in my life. I've never known more in my life. And I've never known less in my life at the same time. I mean, because there's so many different possibilities now that I'm out of the matrix that society is built to say, what this is reality and this is how life is. Well, and it's not. Okay. And now I'm like questioning everything more than ever. So it's very, it's an expansive place. But we got to be grounded. And I think one of the big things I tried to get across in the book is also to get in your body. I spent 40 years trying to get up and out. Now to realize that I'd been tricked. And that the key is to be down and in. And so grounded and so earthed and so connected in my body with the earth, which has its own incredible intelligence which is all about the life force and love. And all we have to do is just sit down and tune into it and go, okay, and we're supported automatically. So getting into the body, do somatic tracking. There are tons. What that means is, like take shoes off, sit down if you can outside, and start tracking. Oh, my feet, how my feet feel, my toe, how do my feet feel in is there energy? Is my right foot feeling different than my left? Work your way up to the ankle and then the thighs and, and all the way up, and spend 10 minutes connecting with your body, getting in it, because the body never lies. We are living in this weird, inverted, upside down, black is white, white is black reality that's being pushed at us, pulsed at us constantly to keep us in conflict and confusion. But the body doesn't lie. And our heart is our greatest guide through all of this. So all through the book, I did my best, Boo Boo, to weave in advice to people on how to ground, how to get out of the matrix, how to stay out, see through it, and gain momentum in the truth of who we really are, which is these incredible, creative, powerful beings of pure love.
What you call in your book the 14 keys to individual freedom and global freedom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You know what I love about your book too is you went down the same rabbit hole I did too with the Sumerians. You talk about Anu, Enki, Enlil. It's weird that got wiped away from history. Like we know nothing about the Sumerians. We're not taught about that. So we start off with the Greeks and the Romans.
Yeah.
But we get the first fart joke from Sumerians in cuneiform writing. No, really, I'm being honest. First fart joke, first liquor recipes, astrology. They knew about the solar system. There was so much about the Sumerians, but they got wiped away from history. And a lot of the biblical stories come from the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and we're not told that. So
no.
And I almost wonder if the Sumerians or the Babylonians had the Jews. The Jews were prisoners of the Babylonians at one time, and they heard all these stories. So I question, Yahweh and El. Those are two different gods.
Yeah.
And any scholar would tell you that Elohim was always used as being plural, and you put that in your book as well, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
because
it was very rarely God.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
The God.
Yeah, you're right. And you hear the ego in them too. I'm a jealous God. Don't worship any other gods but me.
Yeah, it's really ludicrous when you start diving into it. And Boo Boo, that was one of the things that, again, I kept asking myself through the writing of Cracking the Matrix, is like, well, how did we get so blind, deaf, and dumb? So I've talked about some of the religious and spiritual programming and the social programming. Of course, one of the hugest things is that we're being dumbed down through the pollution of our food supply, through chemicals, through pollution, through the deliberate, oh my God, and then medicine, which is designed to. Did you know that the iatrogenic deaths is the third largest death in the United States? It's death from medicine. Wow. It's the third largest cause of death in the United States. It's from medical and pharmaceutical intervention. But anyway, what I wanted to get to is get to the Anunnaki. I had read about ancient aliens. I'd read all of Sitchin's books, the 12th Planet, and all those books. I think he wrote like 12 books. Anyway, I just soaked those up years ago, and I was like, yeah, that sounds right. And when I was reflecting on, well, why are we so deaf, blind, and dumb to what's going on around us, it made total sense that if we were genetically uplifted from apes or whatever source, or from a hybrid source brought in from planet God knows what, who knows, but that we were genetically formulated to be smart enough, but not too smart to figure things out. That we were genetically encoded with a lack of curiosity, that we were genetically encoded with obedience genes. And then of course that ties into the social structure of don't question little Johnny. Don't question what teacher says, boo boo. This is the truth. This is the facts. Believe this. So have the right answer. There was so much influence that looked like, well, I can understand if you're genetically creating a slave race, you create them to be obedient, to follow the leader. So that was another thing that just made a whole lot of sense once I peered outside the matrix and went, I wonder why we didn't see this. That's another big reason, I think.
Yeah, going back to your book, you talked about 60% of Americans over the age of 12 years old have addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, cigarette addiction.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. There are a lot of statistics out there that drop that figure drastically because they don't include nicotine and other substances. They're just focused on your mainstream heroin, drugs, and alcohol. So it's not 60% if you're just going to focus on alcohol and the hard drugs that we're used to. But if you include other substances, then 60%. Something like 70% of anybody, I think 70% of, I don't remember the statistics, but it's close to something like 70% of all adults over 55 in the United States have at least one, if not more, chronic illnesses that they're dealing with. From 55 onwards. It's just like, and we're getting dumber. IQs are dropping. They've been steadily dropping for the last 15, 20 years. Gabor.
I heard Dr. Gabor Mate say, he wrote The Myth of Normal.
Yeah.
But he says 70% of all adult Americans are on some kind of prescription, and 50% are in two or more. So something's wrong when we see our pharmaceutical lines, the lines at the pharmacy looking like McDonald's.
Yeah. Or if you're 70 years old and you walk into a doctor and they ask you what medications you're on, and if you say nothing, they just don't believe their ears. There's like, what do you mean you're not on any medications?
Like Scooby-Doo? Scooby-Doo?
Yeah, so there's this dumbing down, controlling, and don't even get me started on the whole LGBTQIA movement. I mean, I could care less how anybody sexually expresses as long as it's consensual. But there's a real dark side to the whole trans movement and what's being perpetuated. I've been really shocked to see the overnight statistics in the last 10 years of young people now identifying as trans. It used to be forever that those who identified as trans usually understood they had an issue, a dysphoria, body dysphoria, by age 4 to age 8. And it was almost 80% male statistically. And I think the figures were 0.0015% of the population are truly been diagnosed as body dysphoric. This was 15 years ago. Today, 42,000 children in the United States alone were diagnosed as body dysphoric in 2021. 60% of them were teen girls who never had any dysphoric issues prior to their teen years. Now they want to be little boys. So there's how can we confuse you? How can I confuse you? How can I defuse you? How can I castrate you? How can I torment you? How can I depopulate you? It's all these control mechanisms. I'm not saying that there aren't kids that aren't totally understand they were born in the wrong body. I actually helped a chiropractor in Australia. He had an amazing journey. He knew at age 4 that he was born a little girl in a physical girl's body, and he knew very clearly that he was a boy. And he's done the whole physical transition, and it was exactly what his spirit needed. So, I'm not saying that it's not real. It is. But all of these issues, the whole, you can almost look at anything, boo-boo, and if it divides people, if it upsets people, if it turns life upside down, then it's part of this agenda to keep us under the thumb.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff William Cooper talked about. I don't know if you're familiar with William Cooper.
I am familiar with him, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff he was saying in the 90s is coming true, just like David Icke.
Yep.
In the early 90s, David Icke was being laughed at, couldn't get 5 people to hear him talk. Now he's filling up, arenas, and millions of people are coming to hear him speak.
Yeah, I mean, he's banned in 24 countries from speaking and showing up. Yeah.
So what's our hope? Let's end it with some light.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is great. I think this is a great time. I think that this is the Great Awakening, boo-boo. This interdimensional force is leaving. The reason we're seeing what we're seeing, the COVID, the wars, the violence, the AI threat, it's like everything in the world is being thrown at us. Somebody the other day said, geez, Kate, what do you think's going to happen next? And I went, I don't know, alien invasion, another pandemic, crash the economic system, maybe all the above. I don't know. It's like they're pulling out all the stops because it's desperation time on that program. It's like there's so much light building on this planet. There are so many people waking up. Maybe they don't understand the whole conspiracy side of things. But the light is, they're growing in their own light and love. They're getting in their bodies and they're going, I'm going to do this for my community. I'm going to do this for my family. I'm standing up for life. There are so many, many millions and millions and millions and millions of people doing this that the light is becoming so great, it's literally pushing the darkness up and out. And it's being seen. So I'm really getting that all the it's so, oh God, it's heartbreaking to look at pictures of what's going on in Gaza and Israel. It's heartbreaking. But I saw this one video of a Israeli woman whose 17-year-old son was shot in the head and killed. And she stood up weeping in front of the camera and she said, I will not use my son's death as an excuse to go into vengeance and violence. I will not fight. So there are people like that standing up. And a long time ago, I worked with the filmmakers of the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And in the course of working on that film and the books that were done around it, I ended up interviewing a lot of the scientists. Among them, a guy, a quantum physicist by the name of John Hagelin, who had been involved in the particle accelerator CERN in Switzerland. And anyway, I interviewed him and I asked him at one point, you've heard the 100th monkey syndrome, after 100 monkeys learns how to wash their, mango in the creek, then it's kind of like the consciousness of washing your mango in the creek just as naturally filters out through all the monkeys. And, after the 100th monkey, the tipping point is reached and now all the monkeys are washing their mangoes in the creek. So I asked John, what he thought the numbers were necessary to tip consciousness on this planet from the dark to the light, and with a no going back to the dark, but into the light. And he said, yes, I calculated that. And he said, my estimation is 0.5% of the population. That's 8 million people. We're so far beyond that, boo-boo. It's inevitable that, and it's not about winning. It's not the darkness, the light conquers the dark. It ain't that. It's just that the power of life itself is so vibrant and so powerful that the darkness, anti-life can't vanquish it. Life is forever. It's eternal. We are eternal beings. Is the flesh vulnerable? Yes. Is the flesh all we are? No. Life is unstoppable. And so this is the most difficult and marvelous time to possibly be alive on this planet. And despite everything, appearances are deceiving.
Mhm.
So don't be deceived that all is lost and that that's all going to go to hell in a handbasket. It isn't. The exact opposite is true. So I think these are marvelous and very exciting and positive times. And a bitch to live through. And a bitch to live through. Not easy. Not easy. I'm not going to gloss that over in the slightest. But it's so far beyond hope, boo boo. I don't have hope. I just know that this is how life works. Life grows. That's life itself. It evolves. It moves on. It gets bigger. It doesn't get smaller.
Without the mud, there's no lotus flower, right?
Without the mud, there's no lotus flower. Yeah,
No mud,
totally.
no lotus, like Thich Nhat Hanh would say. I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on. I love the acronym for HOPE. It means help other people evolve, and I believe that's exactly what you're doing. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's what you're doing, my friend. Thank you so much for reaching out and having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Aloha.
Namastizzle.